welcome back. Welcome back. Part 9, the end of the plotting series.
Thank you for including me in it. It was a great idea, I feel like, and I learned as much as I offered to writers.
Well, me too, because even the things that you think you know really, really well, when you go back to review them, to explain them to someone else or to teach them, it always helps you remember some of the finer points or just reminds you of some of the things that you've forgotten. So
Exactly.
I think that that's why this has worked. The feedback that I've gotten has included people who are veteran writers who were happy to revisit the plotting process. And we all, so even if you're new to this and this is your first time through sort of a plotting series, we all have issues at one point or another. Sometimes a manuscript gives us more troubles, than the one prior to it. So even if, people have written many, many books, you do find yourself in a situation sometimes where you just need a little help fixing the problem.
Right. There is such a thing called writer's block, and I don't think it's discriminatory. I think it affects all of us at certain times.
Does. And I do think when you hang out with other writers, so recently we were together at the Wisconsin Writers Association Fall Conference, and it's so fun because you're there with writers who are at the very beginning of their journey, and we all remember what that felt like, and then the writers who are, further into their careers, but we're all gaining something from those keynote addresses and those different sessions. I hope that we've been, helpful in that manner, to people who have followed through, along with us through the year.
And, I advocate for all writers, but I also advocate for the writers who are essentially starting a second career, the writers who have had a different career and, raised a family, worked, took care of their, maybe an older adult, a parent, their children, and now are saying, okay, it's my time, I'm going to go for it. And that's me. Yeah. And I want to encourage other writers who are feeling that as well, because, I'm not getting younger. We are not getting younger. And
No,
if you're
not.
you need to do it. And I want to encourage those people who I've always wanted to write a book. What do I need to do? I want to say, get in the game,
Yes.
Jump in, go to a conference, subscribe to your blog, learn, take criticism, write, and
yes. Well, and some of our favorite authors, when you look at their history, they started really later in life. It can be intimidating. Extreme. But I think that what we found too, and this was being talked about a little bit over the course of the weekend as well, is that the generosity of writers, there's just a lot of people willing to help. And that's one of our reasons too for doing this series, was to give back to other writers and share some of the skills that we've gained along the way. But people, in the beginning they've been very generous with us when we were, starting out too. So exactly. It's nice to be able to kind of pay it forward, right?
She was at the conference this week, and Wisconsin Writers Association celebrated its 75th year in existence, and they had, a fabulous event, and Hank Felipe Ryan was there. And
she's fabulous.
I met her years ago, and just starting out, just beginning to get my master's, taking the first couple classes toward a master's, and she told me, she said, do it, jump in, do it, learn, don't be afraid of it. And she was a huge factor in my ability to sit here and say, 2 books later, award nominated, screenplay award nominated. She was a huge factor in me. And exactly, I want to give that back to other people.
Well, and she's somebody else who's had entirely another career. Now she did that. She's doing them at the same time. She's, but she's an investigative news reporter for a TV station in Boston, an Emmy award winner. Like she's won, I want to say close to 30 Emmys by now.
I think over 30, yeah.
Over 30, but to have both those career areas, clearly a storyteller, right? Somebody who is good at conveying information. But I did not know that about her and the encouragement that she gave you. So
yes,
it's a great story. It's nice.
To have somebody of her level say, you can do this, just try. Don't be your biggest obstacle. Don't overthink it. Just try.
Right. It's fun. It's fun and energetic to be around, or energizing to be around people who are all striving for the same thing. You're getting very close to your launch day. So we have you guys all notice that the bio that we have, and it always says pre-published author. Well, very shortly, Tracy TK Sheffield, her first book will be out in early November. And so then we have to change all your biography stuff around. So
thank you for that. Thank you for
I'm looking forward to that too.
Yes. I am thrilled that it's finally coming out. It's called Model Suspect, and it's about a retired fashion model who comes back to her hometown and discovers killer posers. And so she, investigates from there. And I was thrilled to write it. It was a very long journey. I actually wrote it on my hands and knees with a bad back
Oh, God.
over a footstool, typing away.
I'm sure
And
there's people listening to this who can appreciate the writing through the pain of a back injury.
I mean, I'm not kidding you. And I hopefully I'll share this. But maybe we'll do books and beer and I'll share the story. But
Yeah, exactly.
yes,
No, we want
I
to hear,
literally wrote it in this
story.
office over my footstool.
Oh my goodness. Oh, that's awful. It's awful, but it's also like the power of your ability to persist, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. And then when I get stuck, because I'm writing the sequel now and I've got another one of romantic comedy, when I get stuck, that's exactly what I say to myself. I'm like, look, if you can write a novel on your hands and knees with a bad back over a footstool, you can figure this out.
Exactly. Well, and that's a good segue too, into what we're talking about. So we're at the end of the journey, and we've talked the last two parts. We're preparing to edit and then talking about the nitty-gritty of editing, but we didn't talk specifically about what you do when you're faced with like plot problems. So another thing that you need to have some some persistence to attack. A lot of us, if we get to that point where we're like, oh, this plot just isn't working, we may think we should just give up and start something fresh. But there's things that you can do. So that's what we're going to talk about today is do not give up for this particular problem. Do not give up. We can help you work through plotting issues. I can't do anything for your bad back from afar, but we can try to help with plotting issues. We're going to talk about 3 things in particular that can get in your way of a satisfying plot plausibility, where you've got plot holes, problems with the pacing of the plot, and then other structural things beyond the actual pacing, some things that we might be able to do if you've got some structural issues that you need to address.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully you don't have all 3 of these problems in the same manuscript, because then you're going to have a lot of rewriting, but it still doesn't mean that it's impossible. It just means you need to take it step by step and get it done. But let's talk about plot plausibility first. Like if you've got a problem with plot plausibility, you're wanting to ask questions. If the answer to any of these questions is, well, no or yes, does the plot make sense? Oh no, I've got a problem with some logic in the plot. Like I've dropped something, or someone is doing something that is not making sense, one of your main characters. Does it flow logically? Are there gaps in that logic, right? And I think sometimes when we're writing, particularly a mystery, we may have made some leaps in our head and our mind that didn't get down on paper. And then that's when a beta reader might point that out. That
Beta reader can help you. And the one thing I would, first of all, I'd say we've all been through this, the plot plausibility, the pacing, the structure issues. The one thing I would tell you to avoid is the info dump to fix it. Don't just, because if you've got a plot hole and you say, oh my gosh, I didn't address this issue. If I just info dump and give a lot of backstory, that'll fix it. Avoid that answer. As my old professor, Anne Angel at Mount Mary University used to say.
Oh, she's lovely. Yes.
She's fabulous. She used to say, weave it somewhere into the narrative. And she would always say, you can save this. Just go back, find a few sentences even interspersed throughout can help this. So rather than the info dump, try and weave something into the narrative.
Well, and we've all read books where they've done that, and you're like, oh yeah, they explain everything real quick at the end with this like magical chapter that just
yes, avoid the magic chapter.
Don't do that. Don't do that. But you're right, and that's really tricky. Once you've pinpointed, say that you have this problem, maybe you're going to put it in, like you say, weave it in. Maybe it's going to be in dialogue. It could be in some backstory here, but it's not going to be an info dump. It might be a line here, a line there, like you said. It's delicate. It is exactly like weaving threads in, so it feels organic to the story. Do any of your, parts of your plot contradict each other? If, for instance, that you wrote a book in the manner I did, which is write a lot of it one year and then come back to it another year, you may have forgotten some things that you've said, and you pick up, your story and you start to write, and maybe you've missed, as you reread, you've realized, oh, I said this about this situation and it does not mesh.
That's when a style sheet, any good editor, right, is going to have your style sheet, and that's going to refer, if you've used any specific terms for an environment, a building, a nickname, that style sheet helps. And then also having some kind of character Bible. So
Yes.
you have notes about a character, your main character, a sidekick, somebody in the ensemble cast. You can go back and refer to those and then go, oh, you know what? That's right. This character, has blue eyes, not, hazel. And he has a backstory where he's crabby. He's not a cheerful fellow. If you keep good notes, that helps you avoid those continuity errors.
Yes, for sure. I love that. And I do mine in spreadsheet format. I know other people use different formats, particularly for my series that's out. Oh my goodness, there's so many people.
Did you keep that sheet, like when you were writing, would you disengage from the narrative and then go add it into your Excel, or how did you mine?
I didn't do that. I didn't always interrupt my writing to do it. I would go back and fill it in. But for instance, there would be times when, say, there's a new character that's coming in to the scene, and I think that I want their name to be whatever, but I haven't checked. I will go back and check and make sure that I don't have like a Daniel already, in this cast, got mentioned in book 1, just to keep things. I mean, there's how many names out there, right? I mean, you don't need to repeat, anybody's names unless there's a reason to repeat names for like mistaken identity or something. So
that can always fix an issue. Just mistaken identity, or there's a twin somewhere.
Or like, they're thinking about soap operas. She didn't die. It was, it's a coma. It's amnesia. No,
it's amnesia. Okay, we're not recommending do that. But
no, we're not. We're just joking. We're just joking. It's easy enough to go back if you find that, you didn't see it, but a beta reader sees it and says, you said this, but now you said this. Or maybe you brought up questions and you brought up a subplot and you never finished, like you never closed it out. You never finished answering that. I usually leave one of those undone and catch it later and realize I never closed out a subplot question that I'd posed at some point. But mainly it's just about weaving in the details that you may have missed and layering in, some of the finer points to smooth out anything with plot plausibility. So pacing, that's the next thing. If you at all feel that parts of your story lag, maybe, we talked about the middle being, difficult at different times. That's usually where you've got something lagging. Maybe you've sped through the end. Maybe you didn't, give enough reflection, points or time as you were wrapping up the end. I know some people have that issue where you write faster as you get closer to that conclusion, and you need to put more scenes in.
I have two pieces of advice for that. First of all, if you have problems with your pacing, I would stop and ask myself, what does the reader need?
There you go.
If you find that you've got a lot of description, you've got a lot of extra, what's the word? If you've got a lot of
extemporaneous. No,
extemporaneous. I don't know. If you've got a lot of extemporaneous detail that the reader does not need, chunky paragraphs, cut it and say, does the reader really need to know what I had for dinner before the action? Does the reader really need to know this information? Don't be afraid to cut that. You can save it somewhere, but just cut it. So ask what the reader needs. And then the other thing, one of my favorite writers, P.G. Wodehouse, his advice was always get to the dialogue. So you've got all this chunky description, you've got all of this information that maybe the reader doesn't need. Use your dialogue. Use your dialogue to move that chapter along, reveal information that the reader needs, and then you can cut a substantial amount. I think I cut from this book coming out, I probably cut at least 10,000 words.
Oh, wow. That's a significant amount.
It's a significant amount because I was finding that there was information, it just wasn't, I liked it. I thought it was funny because they're humorous, cozy mysteries, but it just wasn't needed. So,
well, and that's a hard thing. And we get better probably at being our own editors in that, fashion. The more we write, is that where the phrase "kill your darlings" comes from?
Kill your darlings. Well, that's true.
Well, you pull things out, and now, and this is just as an aside for a different reason. If you have some scenes that you need to pull out, keep them. You may be able to use them as things that you might give away for free,
Yes.
to fans down the line. I'm always very much in favor of having like a save file for those cut scenes. The other thing, and I don't know at what point, I was well into my writing career when I learned about beat sheets.
Yes.
The BEAT sheets.
Mhm.
And I don't know how somehow I missed that early on, but I want to say it may have been, as more recent as 5 years ago that I learned about beat sheets. If you don't know about them, we're going to have a link to beat sheets in the accompanying post and under this YouTube video so that you can go to them. The one that I tend to go to are on Jamie Gold's website. It's Jamie with an I, Jami Gold.
Mhm.
And what you do, and this is if you like have done what you've suggested and looked at your dialogue and like, is there too much narrative? And you've realized that you're not quite pinpointing why it still feels like it's lagging. Try a beat sheet. You can throw in these sort of like frameworks. You can throw in the number of words in your manuscript. I believe that you say what type of manuscript it is, and then it'll tell you about where, in terms of like the number of words, where certain beats should come. And you
Mhm.
can overlay that with your novel and check it out and see if it's really easy. Maybe you've missed one by like 20, 30 pages or something.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my gosh, this is the problem right here.
Exactly. And it's like a formula, not,
Yeah, oh, it is. It's very mathematical. It should appeal to people who have like left brain, right brain, capabilities. So
yeah. And it's so helpful because it keeps you from going down those rabbit holes. It keeps you from jumping off to this point and adding this information that is interesting to you as the writer. But does the reader need it? That's always what I come back to when I get stuck, when I'm editing, when I'm revising. Does the reader need this? And that's a difficult hat to wear. It's a complete different mindset, but I keep going back to that.
So another author, friend of mine, Angie Stanton, will color code her manuscript. The narrative sections are one color, dialogue is another. And it's a real quick way, like she shades it, right? So real quick way to click through your manuscript and go, oh my goodness, I have pages and pages of narrative in this section. So that's another option. I always like that idea if I'm having trouble figuring out why something feels wrong.
When we're reading or watching a film, we have a sense of story. Human beings have this sense of story, and if you're in for a mystery or you're in for a romance, you have this sense of, okay, this doesn't feel right. It's lagging in this section.
Yes.
Intuitively, we know it, right?
Yeah, we do. And it's funny sometimes when a beta reader points something out and you go, yeah, I was worried about that. How often have we heard somebody say that, right?
Yeah.
And like, so
I've never heard that, but I understand.
Yeah. Or I like to think, yeah, exactly. I like to think that we should stop and fix those, but sometimes we think that it's not going to be noticeable, like something that's maybe nagging at us isn't going to be noticeable to the reader, and it almost always is. It almost always is. So like, I mean, if our gut is saying, ooh, maybe not, then probably we should fix it. So on to the third thing, structure. By structure, I mean like there's a lot of different ways you can tell a story. So maybe you're telling a story with multiple points of view and maybe somehow that's not working. Or maybe you're telling it with a single point of view and perhaps it could benefit by like an alternate point of view. Are you starting in the right place? We talk about like the inciting incident and the hook and all that business that we talked about way back in like part 1 or 2, right? I'm thinking that if you're having issues like this, you may want to go revisit that diagram again, like that whole roller coaster style diagram, or look at the 3-act structure if you prefer that over the diagram. Sometimes structural changes can make a huge difference. I was initially, this is my current manuscript that I'm querying right now. I initially was writing a straight mystery from a single point of view, and I realized that what I needed to do was change that up and add I have two other points of view. It becomes more of a suspense story that way, but the story benefited, the pacing benefited. It's a hard decision to make because those are big structural changes. And I wasn't, I wasn't more than halfway through or anything. And it wasn't like I had to discard anything. There was a little bit of rewriting, but I was adding this other point of view in.
Were you writing in third person? Did you begin writing third person?
I began writing in first, this is YA, young adult. So I was writing in first person, past tense, and I then added a third person, past tense. So the murder victim is in the story with their point of view, and the timelines are different too. And that's another structural element. Do you play with timelines with these points of view? Do you have alternating, an alternate timeline? This gets hard. This is complicated writing. It's like a puzzle. It's like putting really cool together, right? And it's really delightful when it comes, together well.
So it is a difficult thing to do, to engineer, right?
Yes.
And that leads me, that's my segue into Larry Brooks' StoryFix and story engineering. My go-to. I love those. He gives you this formula. But you're engineering, your tale. And so if you can move about within that world from the first person to a third, that's kind of a standard way to reveal information. I don't think that's that unusual. I've seen different, I would recommend not changing points of view in the same paragraph.
Right.
Because that can be, I've seen that in recent work and it's confusing to me. If you're going to change points of view, I prefer having it chapter to chapter,
I do too. I like the cue, right, of having like the chapter shift. I think that's, or at minimum, a section shift that's you're very clearly shifting.
Yes.
Yeah. Because otherwise, if you feel like you have to know all of this, perhaps you're writing with the wrong point of view, and perhaps you need to be writing omniscient, where the narrator is seeing everything.
And that could be part of your structure problem.
That's right.
If you're struggling with revealing information and your pace, maybe your point of view is incorrect. Yeah.
That's right. That's
because
right.
If you're writing in first, there's only so many places where that person can be. So you have to describe going, oh, I went here and I went there, and then I had to witness this, and then I had to witness that. That's kind of a tough thing to do in a book. You have to kind of use some little trickery to get your character everywhere.
Right. And, you mentioned Anne Angel before, and she taught a class on point of view once at a conference I was at, and she used a stage, a diagram of a stage in terms of how each point of view works. So like omniscient is like the person, like the lighting guy or, above, up on the scaffolding, can see everything, but also can see into everybody's minds and knows everything that's going on. First person is like this, the blinders are on. You can't know what this person's doing unless you see it. You can't know what they're thinking, of course. But you're right. It's very limiting. It's very limiting. And sometimes that is, what your story needs, because, the character, that's part of the plot, that the character isn't going to know what everyone else is doing.
Check your pacing, because if you have in your length, because if you have to put your first person point of view character in every scene to witness what's happening, that can extend your story. I mean, it can make it extremely long. So you have to understand that. So that means you're very efficient in your chapters, because you don't want extra words in there, because you're telling a long tale of following this person around with a camera.
Yes.
So,
yeah, right. Yeah, and that's probably too, like, where people can come across the information that they need for the plot, right? The things that character needs. And sometimes that, some of that can happen off the page, and they reveal that they know something. But you have to be really careful with that too, because they can't just magically know stuff either.
They can't magically know something. And it also bloats your, ensemble characters, because you have to have all these people coming in and interacting with your main. That's a lot of people to keep track of.
It is
a lot of conversations to keep track of. So just be aware of that. That's why a lot of people write in third.
Someone, and I can't remember where I was, asked the question about, for instance, young adult always be first person, or should young adult be this, or, should it be present tense? There's all these like everybody wants to get it perfectly right. And the advice from, this was a seasoned writer, and I can't remember now who it was. They said, start writing the story without overthinking it. What feels natural for the story? And if it starts to come out in third person, past tense, and it works, don't overthink it. Don't overthink it. But it's an interesting thing. I think we let our brain just kind of like start to tell the story. If we aren't overthinking it, it's going to come out one way that it's kind of already in our head a certain way.
Right. My theory is your subconscious. And I was talking with, Carrie about this. Carrie Lukasavas, who has her 4th middle grade horse novel coming out.
Yeah, that's a lovely series.
Oh, it's just wonderful. Set in the 70s, young girl in a horse barn. I mean, I wish I could go back there.
A simpler time, perhaps.
Speaking of world building, if I'm going to world build, I'm going back to the horse barn in the 70s. But, my theory is that your subconscious knows the story already.
Yes, that's true. I agree.
You just need to tune into it and get it on the page and then edit, right? Then edit, but it's there. Just start writing and the magic will happen.
Well, and this is the deep editing at the very end that we're talking about. I hope that you get through part 8 and you don't need part 9. I hope you get through part 8 and you've done your editing and your beta readers have given you great feedback. You've hit the mark. So I hope you don't need after, if we've done our job, you might not need part 9. This is what we really hope. But chances are there may be something that you need to deal with to, work with the structure, the plausibility, or the pacing, at least somewhere, in your novel. This has been fun. And like you said, it's just really, I think, helped me be a better writer and think about my plot too. Well, you've been writing all year. I've been writing all year. It's been a good journey with you.
It's been an excellent journey, and I can't thank you enough for including me on it. And I just to be able to help other writers talk about writing, be encouraged with what you're doing. There's no substitute for that. And it's sort of, it's just like a magical ending that we were able to see each other at Wisconsin Writers Association and enjoy,
yes,
and be inspired. And wrap this series up at this basically a few days later. So I hope everybody bookmarks these and learns from them and gives us feedback and kind of gives us advice about what else you'd like to hear.
We haven't decided if we're going to do this again next year or what our focus is going to be. So we'll see. If you all have something that you would love to, deep dive into, and it doesn't have to be a 9-part series. We're happy to cover other topics. If you like this format, we've had a lot of fun doing it, particularly the video format has been really fun for us. And I think everybody appreciates that versus, we read a lot of stuff. So it's kind of nice to have like a podcast or something like this, playing when we're doing other things and we're also learning at the same time.
Right.
So thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. And then definitely, put stuff in the comments. Let us know what else you'd like to learn and we'll see what we can do in 2024. Doesn't that sound crazy?
So 2024. 2024. I know it's around the corner and I don't think I'm ready for it yet, but bring it on. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, well, it'll be here and we'll have to deal with it no matter if we're ready or not, I guess. So.
Exactly. So
right.
Just happy writing, everybody. Let us know how you're doing and give us, let us know what you want to hear about next.
Sounds really good to me. I haven't thought about it yet, what I need to know about next. So we'll have to figure it out.